Hey everyone, today's video is going to be a continuation of my last video because it was popular, and we're going to keep talking about social media and metal. I got involved with metal social media about 20 years ago, and just recently I put up a new pinned tweet. Every week I'll put up K-Man's Full Force Friday releases. I'll still be tweeting out reviews for stuff that I really like or think a lot of people should hear, but I'm going to start tweeting kind of not worth its own tweet reviews in within that pinned tweet. And it reminded me of the not worth its own thread that I started on the Coalesce message board about 20 years ago. Coalesce, the hardcore band from Kansas. I was really involved in a lot of message boards, 1998, 99. I had my own computer, still in high school. One of my favorite hobbies, learning about new music from people on there. Some people had their own like FTP sites and things like that where they would share MP3s or even like MP2s back in the day. Crazy. But our story starts with a not worth its own thread on the Coalesce message board. All of those message boards back then were very cliquey, very not welcoming to new people. They had a set culture with a core group of people, usually people who were in bands that knew each other. Relapse Records bands, Metal Blade, Coalesce was involved with kind of like the Evolution, Second Nature, all those kind of like hardcore bands in the Midwest scene. And most of the message boards were very much like, we don't want new people here. Why would you come here? And if you are here because you love the same things in us, then prove it by sticking around after being bullied and treated like a fucking loser. Everywhere you went, it was pretty much like that. There wasn't a lot of diversity. There wasn't very much inclusivity, and very much like the kind of Illuminati of the admins, the people in the bands, the people behind the labels. There was always a breakfast club of people who were cool enough, and then this vast other group of people who were sort of talking to each other, but were always, always at risk of being bullied and embarrassed publicly by the leaders of the group. So I was absolutely not a leader on any of the message boards. I was only 16 or so. I was frequently bullied for being, too wordy or back then gay. Everybody thought I was gay or thought I was a girl. That was always the funniest way to bully me back then. I would like write a quick review and say like I absolutely love something, and they would, like, multiple people over years just loved bullying me for being gay and things like that. And I got over it because there was good things about the experience, but you had to play the game, and other people couldn't get over it. I saw people being bullied all the time. It was pretty brutal. When I made this thread, the not worth its own thread, I basically became a leader overnight. It had a huge cultural impact on the message board. There were probably about 500 active users that were on there every single day. Not at the same time, but that would visit the message board. And when I started this thread, it was kind of like, hey, everybody can come in here. Like, it doesn't have to be good. You don't have to worry about the admins banning you and like things like that. And the admins let it slide, oddly enough. The thread just exploded, thousands of comments, everybody was in there. It was a much nicer vibe. I felt I had the confidence because I started the thread that when people were being an asshole, I could actually like comment that and be like, you sound like a complete fucking asshole. Where I didn't feel I had the confidence to do that on like the new like Merzbow album thread or whatever the Breakfast Club was doing that day. If somebody was a dick to somebody in that thread, I would just kind of be like, yeah, that's kind of normal. The thread absolutely exploded. I made a similar thread on every message board I was on. All of them exploded. All of them demonstrated to me that people were afraid to be themselves. They were afraid to post. That the admins and the Illuminati and the people like that, they didn't have a good reason to not allow this thread to happen, and some of them even participated and enjoyed it themselves. There was no way they could like be an asshole and still themselves and shut the thread down. So I remember, for example, the Relapse Records not worth its own thread that I started had like over 1,000 pages when I left the message board. It was like an everyday thing that hundreds of people would go in there and like just kind of throw off a comment, and every now and then somebody like, that's absolutely worth its own thread, and that would gain some confidence for them. And it was very much like Twitter is now, where you have the sense of community where you can come in and be yourself, and at worst, you'll get ignored. I think getting ignored is brutal for some people and they can't handle it. At a baseline level of social media, if you can't handle being ignored, you shouldn't be there, right? Either the scroll itself or the sharing should be what is fueling your fire and making you feel good. These are all things that I've learned over years and years of using social media. Obviously, we're talking about 20 years ago that I had these first kind of small revelations about navigating social media as a community, but at the same time, people view it as their own location. It's their own home. No matter how big the community is, there's going to be someone there that thinks of it as their own personal space. It goes for the same for concepts, ideas. They consider them personal space when you attack a band they love, a president that they support. If somebody triggers somebody by saying they don't care about an issue that's really important to them, it's like, well, I'm saying that from my house where it doesn't matter to me. I wasn't yelling it to your house. I was saying it in my house where you're kind of a guest reading my comment. Then it gets down to whose post are you commenting on? Why are you on social media? Are you there to find things to get you riled up that you can kind of argue about? Is that good? Is that working for you? Are you enjoying that? But everything started with that thread 20 years ago. And with that new pinned tweet and these new not worth their own tweet reviews I'm doing, it even sort of like turned the mirror back on me. Where is my confidence lacking? You know, if I write out a review for an album and I'm like, nobody really cares, and I just delete it. You know, why is that different from a review that I'm like, everybody's gonna love this? How on earth do I know? I don't. And on top of that, it should stay focused on being about me, right? I have something to say, I'll say it. If I don't have anything to say, then why on earth am I sending a tweet? So being yourself and navigating that and seeing how things have changed with coming from, you know, the days of the Illuminati and no welcoming new people and all of those things to how different things are now is just crazy. And it brings me to my second piece of this story, which is also from 20 years ago. Another way social media has changed and how the metal community and how it kind of interacts with each other has changed is it occurred to me that around that same time, around 20 years ago, every year, of course, all the message boards would have, you know, album of the year. It was a huge deal. Everybody would post long lists and it would be a huge process. And I'm pretty sure it's 2001 that Graham Belisle's Key Judeo Beast Assassination came out. And this is an album that was, it couldn't hate Christ more. Jesus Christ was a Jew. It was the most hateful of Christ album you could think of. And of course, by extension, by definition, it was anti-Semitic. It wasn't a Nazi album. I mean, it was, if anything, it was like the very first Jew came around and these guys immediately hated them. But the reason that I was thinking about it is because that was like the out in the open, agreed upon album of the year on multiple message boards I was on. There was no discussion about whether the fact that they were anti-Semitic and it was hateful should have an impact on whether we were allowed to say it was the best album. There was no, if you like this album, then by extension, you're a bad person. There was absolutely no, you're supporting Nazis. In fact, back then it was almost a joke that if you give this money to them, yeah, great, let them spend it on swastika flags and stuff for their mom's basement. Like, no one took it seriously from a standpoint of hatred. And absolutely no one took it seriously from a standpoint of it has meaning if you like it. If you like this album, then that means something. It didn't mean anything. You, like, all day long people are liking albums, and god damn did everybody love that album. I mean, again, I think this was 2001. I really, really recall, like, black metal, death metal, hardcore, punk, even people who were just kind of like, nothing good is ever going to come out again, were excited about it. You look at it now, you really can't even mention it on Twitter. If you mention it on Twitter, you're going to get people who don't like you because you're mentioning it. we'll just start there, and all the way down to people, arguing and fighting, and it's just a mess. Now, obviously, 99.9% of the people back then, who were kind of just blindly, obliviously, going through the motions on this, were not Nazis, but more importantly, which is why it's relevant today, they were not the least bit worried about being oppressed. They weren't worried about someone with, Nazi ideologies, or even to simplify, like anti-Semitic ideology, victimizing them. They weren't worried about that. So you don't have to worry about Nazis if, when the Nazis come, they just go, "Oh, sweet, you've got Grandpa Lyle's key in your collection. Well, sweet, have a good day." And that's how most people felt. Oddly enough, there was some diversity as far as race and ethnicity. Obviously, sexual orientation back then, although it wasn't out in the open at all on most of the message boards. But part of being on those boards was that you had to be the type of person who said, "I am not going to be offended in this space. This is a space that's about hatred, about anger, about rage, about people not liking things. If I show up to this place and I'm all about not liking things, even if the stuff I'm not liking is bigotry and Nazism, I'm not welcome there. You should be there because you like the things that we're doing, in other words. So if everybody here has agreed that Judeo-Beast Assassination is the album of the year, and there's nothing wrong with owning it, there's nothing wrong with loving it, if you went on there and you were like, these guys are like anti-Semitic and like totally hateful, they could be causing violence in real life, you would be run out of there, you would be embarrassed, you would be belittled, all of those things. Now it's almost exactly the opposite, where you don't feel safe to say, it's a great album. I'm not a Nazi. I hope they're not harming anybody. You don't even feel safe to say that, really. 20 years ago, it was the opposite. Everywhere, out there, totally fine, totally open. It didn't say anything about you. Obviously, there's a happy middle ground. We're working towards it. It's going to take time as a community. We have to be patient with each other in the meantime. If you get riled up one way or the other, you're not actually helping the community grow, because you're turning other people off. You're shortening you're constricting the airways, the emotional airways, so that things can't properly flow. If there is actually discussion to be had when it comes to stuff like this, it's going to take another decade or two for it to happen. It can't happen right now because we still have people who came up like me who, not me, I'm not as far as me goes for the preference thing, but people like me who came up who highly preferred basically, no politics, be like kind to each other, but even like sarcastic assholery is like just normal. It's metal. It's like, we're all here because we hate people, and now it's obviously very, very different, and it's so much better in terms of being allowed to be yourself, finding your place, finding your people, which is honestly why we're all on social media, whether we know it or not, or whether we're navigating it correctly to reach that end. And to be yourself nowadays is really, really nice because you can do it over time. You can be yourself, you can learn, you can meet new people. It's all kind of happening out there in the open, and when people who are growing with you see you grow and see you change, it leaves that space open for them too. That was not there at all in the past. Metal, social media, hardcore punk, even scenes in person. If you were going to change, you were probably leaving the scene. It probably meant you were, maturing out of it, or you'd grown tired of certain aspects of it. But now with, especially specifically with Metal Twitter, you can stay as engaged and as in love with the elements of the culture that you want to, and the things that you're not as interested in, you don't have to engage in. One of the most important lessons for me when it comes to politics and, social justice and all of those things is you don't have to be involved in every discussion to be involved in every change. There's going to be a lot of discussions that don't actually lead to anything.